in the shadowed valleys of ancient Phoenicia, where the cedar forests whispered secrets to the relentless sea winds and the stars above seemed to pierce the veil between worlds. A forbidden rite unfolded under the cloak of a moonless night. The air hung heavy with the scent of myrrh and blood, drawing the curious and the damned alike toward the hidden temple atop Mount Sannin. Whispers had spread through the ports of Byblos and Sidon like a plague, tales of priests who communed not with the benevolent gods of old but with darker entities that promised power beyond mortal grasp. On this night, as the waves crashed against the cliffs far below, those priests gathered to seal their pact in flesh and ecstasy, inviting the devil himself into their midst. The high priest, Acheron, stood at the altar's edge, his robes of crimson silk embroidered with symbols that twisted like serpents in the flickering torchlight. His face, etched with lines from years of forbidden rituals, bore the mark of one who had stared too long into abysses. He raised his arms, and the assembly of initiates, men and women cloaked in anonymity, fell silent. "Brothers and sisters of the shadowed path," he intoned, his voice echoing off the stone walls carved with depictions of Baal and Astarte in their most carnal forms. "Tonight we transcend the chains of the divine tyrants. We offer our bodies to the one who defies the heavens, the Lord of rebellion and desire." The crowd murmured assent, their eyes gleaming with a mix of fear and anticipation, for they knew the legends. How the devil, that ancient adversary whispered of in scrolls from distant lands, had once walked these shores, seducing the faithful into oblivion. Among them was Lyra, a young acolyte from Tyre, her skin olive-toned and her hair a cascade of midnight waves. She had come seeking escape from the drudgery of her life as a merchant's daughter, lured by promises of eternal youth and untold pleasures. Beside her stood Kale, a warrior priest whose scarred body spoke of battles fought in the name of forgotten kings. He gripped her hand tightly, his breath quickening as the drums began to throb, a rhythmic pulse that mimicked the heartbeat of the earth itself. The temple, hewn from the mountain's heart centuries ago by devotees of a cult long suppressed, featured chambers that descended into labyrinthine depths, where echoes of past orgies lingered like ghosts. Acheron poured a libation of wine mixed with the blood of a sacrificial lamb onto the altar, the liquid steaming as it met the heated stone. "Come forth, O Prince of Darkness," he called, invoking names that twisted the tongue: Lucifer, Samel, the Fallen One, who had been reimagined in Phoenician lore as a lover of chaos, a seducer who granted wishes at the cost of souls. The air grew thicker, charged with an unnatural heat that made sweat bead on bare skin. Torches sputtered, casting elongated shadows that danced like demons across the walls. The initiates began to disrobe, their garments pooling at their feet like shed skins, revealing bodies painted with sigils and henna and ash, symbols of fertility twisted into perversion. Lyra felt a shiver course through her as the first chants rose, a low hum that vibrated in her chest. Kale leaned close, his lips brushing her ear as he whispered, "Do not fear, for in this union, we become gods." She nodded, her heart pounding, drawn into the circle forming around the altar. The priests, 13 in number to mock the sacred cycles of the moon, positioned themselves at the points of a star etched into the floor, their bodies oiled and glistening. Acheron, the apex, held aloft a dagger forged from meteoric iron, its blade inscribed with incantations that glowed faintly in the dim light. The rite commenced with the invocation of elements. Earth from the mountain's soil scattered at their feet, water from the sacred spring dripped onto tongues, fire from the torches licked at exposed flesh without burning, and air stirred by fans of peacock feathers that carried scents of opium and jasmine. As the chants intensified, visions began to assail the participants. Fleeting glimpses of horned figures in the smoke, eyes like embers watching from the periphery. One initiate, a veiled woman named Syria from the hills of Lebanon, gasped as she felt invisible hands caress her, pulling her deeper into the throng. The orgy ignited slowly, like a fire kindled from embers. Bodies pressed together, hands exploring in the dim glow, lips meeting in fervent kisses that tasted of salt and wine. Acheron paired with a young priestess, their union a deliberate act of defiance against the chaste vows of rival temples. He entered her with a ritualistic thrust, reciting verses that called upon the devil to witness and partake. "Enter us, O eternal rebel," he groaned, his movements synchronized with the drum's accelerating beat. Around them, the assembly followed suit. Men with women, women with women, men with men, in a tapestry of limbs and moans that blurred the lines of identity. Lyra found herself drawn to Kale, their bodies entwining on the cool stone floor. His hands roamed her curves, igniting sparks of pleasure that chased away her lingering doubts. "This is our offering," he murmured against her neck, guiding her atop him as the chants swelled. But as ecstasy built, a presence manifested. A chill wind that swept through the chamber, extinguishing half the torches. Shadows coalesced at the altar's center, forming a silhouette that towered over the writhing forms. The devil appeared not as a monstrous beast but as a being of exquisite beauty. His skin like polished obsidian, horns curling elegantly from a brow framed by locks of flame-red hair. His eyes, pools of infinite night, scanned the room with predatory hunger. The priests paused in their revelry, awestruck as the entity stepped forward, his voice a silken thunder that resonated in their minds. "You summon me with flesh and fire," he said, his words weaving through the air like smoke, "and I accept your tribute." He extended a hand, and Acheron knelt, offering the dagger. The devil pricked his own finger, a drop of ichor falling onto the altar, mingling with the libations. At that moment, the orgy resumed with renewed fervor, the entity's presence amplifying desires to maddening heights. Invisible forces joined the fray, tendrils of shadow that caressed and penetrated, eliciting cries of bliss and terror. Syria, emboldened, approached the devil, her body trembling. "Grant me power over my enemies," she pleaded, pressing against him. He smiled, revealing teeth like sharpened pearls, and drew her into an embrace that transcended the physical. His touch ignited visions in her mind. Empires crumbling, lovers betrayed, secrets unveiled. As he claimed her, the room filled with the scent of brimstone, and the other participants felt the surge. A wave of dark energy that heightened sensations, turning pleasure into a weapon of the soul. Meanwhile, in the outer chambers, guardians stood watch, their spears at the ready against intruders. But whispers of the rite had reached the ears of rivals. Priests of Baal from the city temples, who viewed this cult as heresy. Led by High Priest Malachar, a stern figure clad in white linen, they ascended the mountain path under cover of darkness, torches muffled to avoid detection. Malachar's face twisted in righteous fury as he recalled the prophecies. How such depravities would summon abominations that could unravel the fabric of their world. "We must purge this blight," he declared to his followers, a band of zealots armed with blades and incantations. Back in the temple's heart, the orgy spiraled into chaos. Lyra, lost in Kale's arms, felt the devil's gaze upon her. He beckoned, and she rose, compelled by an unseen force. Kale protested, but shadows restrained him, forcing him to watch as the entity pulled her close. "You seek freedom," the devil whispered, his breath hot against her skin, "and I shall give it." Their union was a storm of sensations, pain mingling with rapture, visions of ancient battles flashing before her eyes. She saw Phoenicia's glory and its fall, ships burning on the horizon, cities reduced to ash by invading hordes. Acheron, observing, chanted louder, drawing more initiates into the devil's orbit. Pairs became trios, groups merging in a sea of flesh where boundaries dissolved. The air thrummed with moans and invocations, the stone floor slick with sweat and offerings. One priest, overcome, collapsed in ecstasy, his body convulsing as if possessed. The devil moved among them, touching here, possessing there, his form shifting to match desires. Now a voluptuous temptress for the men, now a virile warrior for the women. Hours passed in this timeless revelry, the night deepening as stars wheeled overhead. But outside, Malachar's group breached the outer gates, slaying the guardians in silent combat. Blood spilled on the sacred paths, alerting the inner circle. A cry echoed through the chambers. "Intruders!" The orgy faltered, bodies disentangling as fear pierced the haze of lust. Acheron rose, his eyes blazing. "Defend the right," he commanded, seizing the dagger. The devil laughed, a sound like cracking thunder, and vanished into smoke, leaving his essence infused in the participants. Chaos erupted as Malakar's zealots burst in, swords drawn. "Blasphemers!" Malakar roared, his voice cutting through the din. Clashes ensued, naked cultists grappling with armored foes, blood mingling with the remnants of passion. Lyra, empowered by the devil's touch, fought with unnatural ferocity, her nails raking across a zealot's face. Kale wielded a torch as a weapon, setting robes ablaze. Syria chanted counterspells, summoning shadows that ensnared attackers. The battle raged through the temple's halls, bodies falling amid the altars and carvings. Acheron confronted Malakar at the main altar, their duel a clash of ideologies. "You worship stagnation?" Acheron spat, lunging with the dagger. Malakar parried with his staff, replying, "And you court damnation." The fight was brutal, blows exchanged as the room filled with screams. Finally, Acheron struck true, the blade piercing Malakar's chest. But as the high priest fell, he uttered a curse. "May your devil consume you all." With the intruders defeated, the cult regrouped, tending wounds amid the carnage. The devil reappeared, his form more solid, fed by the violence. "Your devotion pleases me," he said, gesturing to the survivors. The orgy resumed, now laced with the thrill of survival, bodies pressing together over the fallen. Lyra and Kale reunited, their passion fiercer, marked by the blood of battle. Acheron, victorious yet weary, joined them, the three forming a triad that symbolized the cult's resilience. As dawn approached, the rite reached its climax. The devil, sated, bestowed gifts, visions of future conquests, elixirs of longevity brewed from the night's essences, and pacts sealed in whispers. "Remember this night," he intoned, fading into the ether. "For in your ecstasy, you have bound yourselves to me eternally." The initiates, exhausted and transformed, dispersed into the morning mist, carrying the seeds of darkness back to their cities. Yet the story did not end there. In the weeks that followed, whispers of the night spread, birthing new converts and enemies alike. Lyra, now a priestess in her own right, traveled the coast, seducing sailors with tales of forbidden pleasures. Kale built hidden shrines in the mountains, training warriors in the cult's ways. Acheron, from his temple perch, orchestrated rituals that grew bolder, invoking the devil in ever grander orgies that shook the foundations of Phoenician society. One such gathering occurred under a blood moon, drawing hundreds to a secluded cove where waves lapped at altars of driftwood. Bodies writhed in the surf, salt mingling with sweat as chants rose to the crimson sky. The devil manifested amid the foam, his presence a tidal wave of desire that swept through the crowd. Lyra led the rites, her voice commanding as she paired initiates in intricate patterns, each union a thread in a web of power. But rivals persisted. A coalition of temple elders from Carthage, hearing of the cult's expansion, sent assassins cloaked as merchants. They infiltrated a ritual in the forests near Sidon, where the orgy unfolded amid ancient cedars, bodies entangled in roots and vines. Poison daggers flashed in the firelight, claiming lives before the cult could react. Kale fell defending Lyra, his blood soaking the earth as he gasped his last words. "Continue, for us." Grief fueled Lyra's rage. She invoked the devil alone that night, offering her sorrow as tribute. He appeared, consoling her with touches that reignited her fire. "Vengeance shall be yours," he promised, granting her shadows that could kill from afar. Armed thus, she hunted the assassins, striking in their sleep, their screams echoing through the ports. Acheron, aging yet unbowed, chronicled these events in hidden scrolls, tales of nights where flesh met the infernal in symphonies of sin. The cult flourished in secrecy, its orgies becoming legends that tempted the pious and damned alike. In hidden grottos and forgotten ruins, Participants surrendered to ecstasies that blurred pleasure and pain, each rite strengthening the devil's hold. Years turned to decades, and Phoenicia evolved under Persian shadows, but the cult endured, adapting its rituals to new conquerors. Lyra, immortal through the devil's grace, became a wandering oracle, her beauty unchanging as she orchestrated orgies that toppled tyrants. In one infamous night, amid the palaces of Tyre, she seduced a king's court into debauchery, the devil joining as a masked noble, his influence unraveling alliances. The orgy that night was a masterpiece of depravity. Nobles and slaves alike stripped bare, bodies painted with gold and crimson, writhing in halls adorned with tapestries of mythic lovers. Wine flowed like rivers, laced with hallucinogens that summoned visions of infernal realms. The devil moved among them, possessing hosts to heighten the frenzy. A queen moaning in ecstasy as he claimed her, a general betraying secrets in the throes of passion. Betrayal followed, as always. A loyal vizier, horrified, rallied guards to storm the palace. Swords clashed amid the naked throng, blood spraying across heaving forms. Lyra fought with demonic fury, shadows coiling around foes like serpents. Acheron, summoned by premonition, arrived with reinforcements, turning the tide in a whirlwind of violence. In the aftermath, the cult claimed the palace as a new temple, its walls echoing with perpetual rites. But the devil demanded more, sacrifices of innocence to fuel his manifestations. Lyra hesitated, her humanity flickering, but the allure of power won. She lured youths from villages, initiating them in orgies that corrupted their souls, binding them eternally. Centuries blurred, Phoenicia fading into history's mists. Yet the cult's legacy persisted in whispers across the Mediterranean. Descendants carried the flame, adapting to Roman gods and Christian edicts, their orgies hidden in catacombs where the devil still appeared, his form evolving with the times. In one final vision, Lyra stood atop the ruins of the original temple, the sea wind whipping her robes. The devil joined her, their union a culmination of eons, bodies merging in a vortex of shadow and light. "You have served well," he murmured, as ecstasy claimed her utterly. And in that moment, the night when priests made love to the devil lived on, an eternal cycle of desire and damnation. The tale spread through ages, a cautionary epic of ancient Phoenicia's darkest hour, where flesh and infernal fire forged bonds unbreakable. Those who heard it felt a stir within, a temptation to seek their own forbidden nights, for the devil's embrace lingered in the blood, waiting to awaken. As the vortex of shadow and light dissipated atop the crumbling temple ruins, Lyra descended from the heights of Mount Sannin, her form cloaked in the remnants of ecstasy that pulsed through her veins like liquid fire. The ancient stones beneath her feet, worn by countless footsteps of devotees long turned to dust, seemed to hum with residual energy from the infernal union, guiding her path downward through mist-shrouded paths where twisted olive trees clutched at the earth as if fearing the abyss below. Phoenicia's coastline stretched out in the dimming twilight, its harbors dotted with the flickering lights of merchant ships that carried spices and silks from distant realms, oblivious to the dark legacy she bore within her immortal frame. The cult's influence, once confined to hidden grottos and moonlit coves, now seeped into the very soil of the land, sprouting tendrils of corruption that would entwine with the roots of empires yet to rise. In the shadowed alleys of Tyre, where the air hung thick with the brine of the sea and the acrid smoke of forges hammering bronze idols, Lyra established a new sanctuary disguised as a house of healing. There, under the guise of herbal remedies and whispered prophecies, she gathered the weary and the ambitious, those souls adrift in the tumult of Persian rule that had cast its iron shadow over the Phoenician cities. Her eyes, now flecked with specks of infernal gold, pierced the veils of mortal pretense, selecting initiates whose hearts harbored seeds of rebellion against the divine order. The rites recommenced in the depths of night, bodies converging in chambers lit by lamps fueled with oils infused from night-blooming flowers that induced visions of otherworldly realms. Limbs intertwined in patterns mimicking the constellations above, each caress an invocation to the devil's lingering essence, drawing forth surges of power that mended broken bones or ignited flames in empty hearths. miracles twisted into temptations that bound the faithful ever tighter. Word of these gatherings spread through the ports like a subtle poison, carried on the lips of sailors who had tasted the forbidden fruits in Lyra's embrace. From Sidon to Byblos, merchants whispered of a priestess whose touch could unravel fates, and soon the cult's tendrils extended beyond the cedar-clad mountains into the arid expanses of the hinterlands, where nomadic tribes roamed under stars that seemed to wink with malevolent intent. Lyra traveled these wastes on a chariot drawn by steeds with eyes like glowing coals, her passage marked by unnatural storms that quenched thirsts while sowing doubts in the minds of the pious. In oases ringed by palms that swayed like supplicants, she orchestrated ceremonies amid the dunes, where sands shifted to form sigils that glowed under the moon's pale gaze. Participants, drawn from Bedouin clans and escaped slaves, shed their garments to the winds, their forms merging in undulating waves of flesh that evoked the primordial chaos from which the world had sprung. Yet, as the cult flourished, shadows of opposition coalesced in the temples of Baal and Astarte, where orthodox priests divined omens in the entrails of sacrificial beasts, interpreting twisted viscera as warnings of an encroaching darkness. Emissaries from these sanctuaries ventured into the night, cloaked in anonymity, to infiltrate the rites and bear witness to the depravities that mocked their gods. One such spy, a gaunt figure named Eshman from the marble halls of Carthage, concealed himself among the initiates during a ritual in a cavern beneath the cliffs of Oksiv. The air within throbbed with the rhythm of drums carved from human bone, and as bodies pressed together in fervent unions, he felt the pull of the infernal presence, a seductive whisper that eroded his resolve. The orgy unfolded in layers of intensity, starting with tentative explorations that built to frenzied climaxes where shadows danced independently, caressing skin and delving into hidden recesses, amplifying sensations until cries echoed off the dripping stalactites. Eshman escaped at dawn, his mind fractured by the visions implanted during the rite, glimpses of cities aflame and gods toppled from their thrones. He reported to his masters, igniting a crusade that swept through the Phoenician lands like a purifying blaze. Temples mobilized warriors clad in linen armor etched with protective runes, their blades blessed in sacred fires to sever infernal bonds. Raids descended upon suspected lairs, shattering altars and scattering initiates into the wilderness. Lyra, forewarned by dreams sent from the devil's realm, evaded capture, leading her followers through secret passages hewn in the mountain's bowels, where phosphorescent fungi illuminated paths trodden by ancient spirits. In these subterranean realms, the cult adapted, their orgies taking on a primal ferocity amid echoing drips and the distant rumble of underground rivers, bodies slick with moisture and earth as they communed in darkness that heightened every touch to exquisite torment. The pursuit intensified, driving the cult seaward, where they commandeered vessels under the cover of fog-shrouded nights. On the decks of these ships, swaying with the Mediterranean's restless swells, rites continued unabated, the salt spray mingling with the sweat of entwined forms as waves crashed in symphony with mounting ecstasies. Lyra stood at the prow, her hair whipping like serpents, directing the unions that invoked storms to confound pursuers. One tempestuous night, as lightning etched the sky in jagged sigils, the devil's essence manifested in the foam-crested waves, rising as ethereal figures that joined the fray, their touches cold as the deep yet igniting fires within. The orgy spanned the length of the ship, from bow to stern, participants clinging to rigging and rails as the vessel pitched, their cries lost in the thunder's roar. Landing on distant shores, the cult infiltrated the isles of the sea, where Cycladic ruins whispered of older mysteries. In Crete's labyrinthine palaces, overgrown with vines that concealed entrances to forgotten chambers, Lyra revived ancient Minoan practices, blending them with Phoenician perversions. Bull's horns adorned the altars, and initiates donned masks of beasts, their bodies painted in ochre and lapis, engaging in rituals that echoed the myths of gods coupling with mortals. The devil's influence permeated these gatherings, causing stone walls to pulse with life, carvings coming alive to participate in the carnal dance. Shadows elongated into appendages that explored and possessed, driving the assembly to heights of frenzy where distinctions between human and divine blurred into oblivion. Opposition followed across the waves, as word reached the oracles of Delphi, who proclaimed visions of a spreading blight from the east. Greek hoplites, allied with Phoenician exiles, set sail in triremes rowed by slaves whose backs bore the scars of whips. Battles erupted on rocky beaches, where cultists fought with daggers forged in infernal fires, their naked forms slippery with oil and blood, turning skirmishes into chaotic melees of grappling limbs and flashing steel. Lyra wielded shadows as weapons, coiling them around throats and limbs, strangling foes while her followers pressed the advantage in surges of unholy strength. Victorious, they claimed the fallen as offerings, incorporating their essences into subsequent rites that grew ever more elaborate, bodies arranged in geometric patterns that channeled cosmic energies. Venturing inland, the cult penetrated the heart of Anatolia, where Hittite ruins brooded amid plateaus scarred by ancient wars. In valleys ringed by jagged peaks, Lyra established enclaves disguised as nomadic encampments, drawing wanderers with promises veiled in enigma. Nights transformed these sites into arenas of excess, fires leaping high to illuminate writhing masses where every sense was assaulted, scents of incense thick as fog, tastes of spiced wines that burned the throat, sounds of flutes wailing like tormented souls. The devil's presence grew tangible, manifesting as gusts of wind that parted flesh from bone in illusory torments, only to heal with waves of pleasure that left participants craving more. Persecution mounted from the east, as Persian satraps, alerted by spies embedded in trade caravans, dispatched cavalry to root out the heresy. Hooves thundered across dusty plains, lances gleaming under relentless suns, clashing with cult defenses woven from illusions and dark sorceries. Ambushes in narrow defile turned pursuits into slaughters, shadows rising to engulf riders and steeds alike, their screams swallowed by the earth. Lyra, atop a ridge, orchestrated the chaos, her gestures summoning fissures that belched forth vapors inducing madness, causing enemies to turn upon one another in fits of rage. Fleeing northward, the cult crossed into the misty realms of Thrace, where forests dense with oak and pine concealed barbarian tribes attuned to primal forces. Here, in glades circled by standing stones etched with runes of forgotten tongues, rites evolved to incorporate savage elements. Drums pounded from stretched hides, bodies adorned with feathers and bones, unions fierce as animal matings. The devil delighted in this rawness, his essence infusing the trees themselves, branches twisting into embraces that held participants aloft in suspended ecstasies. Visions assailed the initiates, glimpses of primordial voids where stars birthed monsters, fueling desires that transcended flesh. Word of these disturbances reached the courts of Macedonian kings, who viewed the cult as a threat to their burgeoning empires. Armies marched through fog-laden valleys, torches piercing the gloom, only to find themselves ensnared in labyrinths of illusion where paths looped eternally. Battles in the undergrowth devolved into primal struggles, swords clashing against claws conjured from shadow, blood soaking the moss as cultists fought with the ferocity of cornered beasts. Lyra, elusive as mist, slipped through the lines, reforming her followers in hidden clearings where the orgies resumed, healing wounds through communal raptures that knit flesh and spirit anew. Pushing westward, the cult infiltrated the Italic Peninsula, blending with Etruscan mysteries in tombs carved deep into tough rock. Painted walls depicted scenes of underworld feasts, now brought to life in rituals where participants descended ladders into chambers echoing with the drip of seepage. Bodies pressed against cold stone, the chill contrasting with inner fires kindled by infernal touches. Orgies unfolding in near darkness where senses sharpened to detect the slightest brush or breath. The devil's form shifted here, adopting guises of chthonic deities, his presence evoking earthquakes that rattled the vaults, heightening the thrill of impending collapse. Roman legions, expanding their dominion, encountered these enclaves during campaigns, their disciplined ranks fracturing under the cult's seductive assaults. Scouts vanished into the nights, drawn by ethereal songs that promised forbidden knowledge, only to return as converts spreading discord. Sieges of underground lairs turned into descents into madness, soldiers emerging babbling of visions that eroded loyalties. Lyra orchestrated escapes through hidden aqueducts, her followers emerging in distant hills to rekindle the flame. Centuries wove onward, the cult threading through the fabric of rising civilizations, adapting to Celtic druid groves in the north, where mistletoe-draped oaks witnessed rites amid swirling fogs. Bodies circled sacred fires, leaping flames casting grotesque shadows that joined the dance, unions syncing with the earth's pulse. The devil reveled in the wildness, storms raging overhead as lightning struck anvils of power. In Iberian plateaus, under Moorish influences yet to come, the cult merged with indigenous fertility cults, orgies in cave systems where stalagmites served as phallic altars. Echoes amplified moans into symphonies, shadows pooling into forms that possessed and released in cycles of torment and bliss. As empires fell and rose, the cult persisted, infiltrating Byzantine courts where mosaics concealed secret chambers for nocturnal gatherings. Silken robes shed in opulent halls, bodies gliding across marble floors polished by centuries, the devil's essence in the incense smoke curling through air heavy with intrigue. Through the dark ages, in monastic ruins abandoned to weeds, rites continued in defiance of crucifixes, shadows mocking the light. Lyra, timeless, wandered cloaked in legend, her touch igniting sparks that spread across continents. Into Renaissance shadows, the cult hid in alchemical laboratories, orgies blending with experiments where elixirs amplified sensations, bodies vessels for transmutations of soul. The eternal cycle spun, darkness threading through history's tapestry. Lyra's legacy a vein of obsidian in the marble of time, forever drawing the damned into its embrace.